Hi, and welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I am Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back.
It is that time of year where parents of high school seniors are going through the same thing nationwide as many of their children are applying to colleges. So today we are going to talk about that process as parents.
Yes, and tomorrow, March 27th, is Ivy Day. Sylvia, can you explain really quick to our listeners what Ivy Day is?
Sure. So tomorrow is the day that all the Ivy League schools let their candidates know whether or not they're admitted, they're rejected, or waitlisted.
Yes, yeah. I feel like this is kind of the epitome of the stress that can happen in college applications.
Yes,
If
it's like
you're
all mounts to this one day, right?
totally, if you're a student who is in shooting range for the Ivy League, all 8 schools are going to release on the same day at the same time, I think.
Yeah, and I believe some of the Ivy pluses also release on that day as
Yes,
well.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of schools that release on this day. It's a big day for kids, and unfortunately with that, if your child is intending on applying to an Ivy League school or has applied to an Ivy League school, they should be prepared to face a rejection. Purely based on statistics, right?
Right, right, right,
This has nothing to do with the application. This is a statistics problem, right?
right.
With the sheer number of applications. And I think this is very important as it relates to teen mental health. This is a significant stressor on children and families. Specifically, we're going to focus on the college application process and how to guide our teens through that.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
Hopefully, this episode today can both describe the process a little bit to parents and then maybe give some comfort and support to parents who are going through that process or will go through that process next year, right?
Yes, there's so much we could talk about. Let's give it a try. But I do want to make a quick point. I am in no way a believer that every student should go to college. There are so many options out there. I don't want it to be misconstrued that what we're saying is that everybody should go to college.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
We referenced Ivy Day, and I do want to point out there is a little bit of a different feel in the Northeast where you are as to where I am in pretty far deep in South Texas.
Right.
So when we think about Ivy Day, for example, for us to get from the San Antonio area to any of the Ivy League schools, it's a pretty significant travel step.
Right.
I think probably most relatable to us is that when I poll my kids, everybody does know when the University of Texas, when UT Austin releases their decisions and at what time. That's a kind of a stressful day for our school system. But when I ask them about Ivy Day, they each may know like 2 people that are applying to Ivy League schools, but nobody's really talking about it. And they only know that because they're close friends with them. Nobody's really mentioning it. It's not on people's radar like it is where you are. So just tell me a little bit of what it's like at your school, what you think it's like at your school.
Sure. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but a large portion of the people in my children's regular public high school, I think, consider at least one Ivy. And it is like our closest Ivy, I think, is less than a 2-hour drive from where we are here, right? So it's closer, it's accessible, probably closer than some Texas schools are to you, right?
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Yeah. So it's always a big deal around here. I mean, I don't know the percentage, but I would guess 20%
Oh, yeah. So it's a
of
lot.
the
It's a
school
lot of kids.
maybe applies to one Ivy.
Yes,
I don't know, right?
I feel like that's a day that I might not want to go to school, or maybe the day after. Like I don't want to be around because the majority are going to get rejected. This is
Right.
a statistical thing that we know.
The other thing about the day after Ivy Day is that if you've been rejected and you look at the person that got in or people that got in, sometimes you think to yourself, I know that person and I know me. and it
Yeah.
can be a very personal thing when it's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
why did they take them instead of me? I know this about me. I know that about them. And it can be psychologically just, it takes some time. Sometimes people need a personal day just to kind of be okay with the results of what
Absolutely.
happened, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we're talking about the Ivies because they're just the most like obvious grouping to highlight because it's so intense, so high pressure, and that acceptance rate in those schools is what 3 to 5%. It's
I think
exceptionally
some of them
low.
is like 1%.
Yeah,
Like it's
so
as
low.
low as 1%.
So low. But whatever we're saying with reference to Ivy Day can be extrapolated to any of the schools, really. The acceptance rates have gone down so much as the application pool has skyrocketed. And there's so many of these schools that in our day were kind of considered safety that are in no way safeties. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of rejection going on in this process. So the Ivy
sure.
League is just the extreme example we can use to make our points, but it's not limited to that. Like it is, so many schools.
Yeah, you made the reference like your local UT Austin, the day they release is a big deal to the kids in your area. In my area, the day that University of Maryland College Park releases
Hmm.
their admittance, which is a little bit early, is a big day. And I can only imagine in California, the day the UC system
Oh,
releases their
absolutely.
results can be a similar feel to, the Ivy Day per se, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I want to start off by sharing a couple of analogies that I have to the college application process, just to kind of describe it a little bit to parents who maybe haven't gone through the process yet. The first analogy is that applying to college is kind of like climbing Mount Everest.
Oh, I have a cousin that climbed Mount
Well,
Everest.
yeah, so then you have firsthand knowledge on this. Um, so, when you hear about people who want to climb to the top of Mount Everest, it is not an easy feat and it requires a lot of support.
No, yes.
And there are a lot of factors that come into play as to whether or not you're going to make it.
Mhm.
And some of that is completely out of your control, like weather. A sudden cloud or storm could move in when you're poised to make your run
Right.
to the top and it foils all of your plans. And
Yes.
I feel like that is what the college application process is like for students in America. It's a high goal.
Right.
It's
Right,
it's
right.
you need some support like your Sherpas and you also need to have the conditions be perfect. Like I don't think it's wrong to try to achieve it. But, to have the perspective in mind that it may be out of your control, it may be factors unknown to you that are playing a role, or it may just be the cohort of the group in your graduating class. And to have that perspective that it is for a large part out of your control. And I'm not saying that it's not worth trying, but to not have so much riding on it, right?
Yes. Yeah. I want to take your analogy a little bit further. And if you make it to base camp 1 at Everest, that is almost 20,000 feet. Right?
Yes.
That's a huge feat. Now, my
That's a big
cousin who has
accomplishment. Yeah.
summited Everest, I'm sure would completely disagree with me. But it's almost like, yeah, aim for the summit. But man, if you make it to any place on Everest, you should be
Right.
exceptionally proud.
Good for you, right? Like, good for you for
Yeah,
going for it,
I'm
right?
certainly
Like,
not going there. Yes, 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 yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, no, I like that analogy a lot. I do
The
feel like
sec
that's how we have to approach it these days.
Yes. Okay, the next analogy I wanna make is to describe the college application process like a roller coaster. So, as you're at an amusement park, waiting in line for the roller coaster, there's a degree of excitement about that. You're excited, maybe slightly apprehensive. Those are the feelings that sometimes parents and kids have as they're approaching, the end of their junior year, the beginning of their senior year. And to take the roller coaster analogy a little bit further, you are on ups and highs, and you sometimes are on downs and lows. Like the day that you get your first acceptance, you are up there, and then you get a deferral, and throughout the entire senior year, You are on an up and down roller coaster of emotion, both you and your child, right? Of acceptance and rejection and scholarship and deferral and, uh, um, honors programs and wait lists. Like it, and sometimes, as you kind of approach the late spring, you're like, how many more ups and downs can
Yes.
me
Yes.
or my child go through at
Yeah.
this point,
Mhm.
right? Like, I think a lot of people feel like that towards the end of the whole process.
Yeah, I love that. I want to, just like with Everest, I want to expound just a little bit more on your roller coaster analogy and point out that I think between the parent and the child, certainly with me, at some points, it's like we are at different parts on the roller coaster, right? Like my child might be riding up to the top, like about to do the thrilling drop. And I might be like in the throes of the upside down spins, because as a parent, I'm also processing that year, this significant change that is about to happen.
Yeah.
There's loss, there's nostalgia, there's sadness, there's excitement, there's happiness, there's, I don't know, all of the things. So I think there's often sometimes a mismatch between where the parent is in this process and where the child is.
Yeah, I think the parents' roller coaster, like you say, doesn't necessarily hinge on all the college information per se. Like they may feel at a low at their child's 18th birthday that year, knowing that this might be the last birthday that they celebrate together. I might not see you on your birthday.
Yeah.
And those ups and downs can be difficult for parents as well, right?
The college application process is a special stressor in parents' lives.
Yeah.
And I think it can be viewed for parents as being like an ultimate judgment day,
Yeah.
right? Where, on display in front of your family and your community, your child's college destination, if they're college bound, is a concrete metric that a lot of parents feel like defines their success as a parent. And this feeling puts a lot of pressure on parents. And it definitely adds a layer of complexity to this process that is already so fraught with emotion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's use our time in the second half to explore some of those emotions, particularly that our child will feel, and how we can support them through that, as well as just some fun, practical hacks for getting through this process.
How have you seen your role in helping your children apply to college and decide for college?
From the beginning, I am, and honestly, in the way that we parent our kids in general, I am preaching to them that their identity is in no way hinged upon what happens with their college applications, right? I am raising them up and reminding them of who they are as a person. Some of that stems back to our faith, like who they are before God and their faith, but it also is just in general who you are as a Carlin, who you are as somebody who has integrity and does things with excellence, right? There are things about you that define you, and what a college admissions counselor says about your application does not define you, right? I'm instilling that in my kids. And part of that is that as they put together their college application and I'm helping them figure out where to apply, I'm also acknowledging to them, there are things that I know about you that make you an incredible person that are not reflected on this. So I can give you a couple of examples. I had one child who just spent a lot of time on his own, really learning how to play the piano, self-taught. And he got to this point where he can take song requests and just put together these beautiful full arrangements of almost any song that you throw at him. And I would tell him, like, that aspect of who you are and the fact that you could teach yourself that is so amazing. And that's going to serve you well for the rest of your life, because it wasn't in some structured activity where you were competing. It's not reflected on a college application. But just the fact that you as a person can take the time to pursue this interest on your own and develop it to this level speaks so highly of your ability to succeed as an adult later in life and enjoy pursuits later in life. And college admission counselors, unless you somehow focus on that in an essay, are not going to see that about you. And I kind of take the stance with my kids. Like I I look back on their high school time and say, like, these are the things I love about who you are and what you've done. And I want you to realize your identity is not wrapped up in what a college admission counselor says, because they're not going to see a lot of this, right? They don't see it unless it was an activity with award and achievement and competition, et cetera, or grade, right? There's so many things about who you are that don't show up on this. So I feel like that gives me the ability to have these very frank discussions with them. And then after that, I usually sit down in the summer with each of my rising seniors and kind of talk to them about making a list of places they want to consider applying to. We make that list, and then not everybody's going to do this or want to do this, but I am still a believer in sort of ranking those schools as far as what I think is your quote unquote safety. And then we actually create a spreadsheet where we rank order those schools. Here's your list of 10 schools you're going to apply to. I can put in the spreadsheet. I suspect you're going to get in here, 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 here. This is a maybe, this is a maybe, this is a maybe. And then some of those in that sweet spot where you weren't sure, it's a little bit of a lottery. And some of them turn to acceptances. And then you've got a little broader list of ones to choose from. So that's a like broad view of one of the ways that I help my kids with their college applications.
I love that story, Vivian. Do you have any hacks to share with our listeners about how you navigated the college application process?
Okay, another one of my hacks, the college process requires a lot of essay writing. Mm-hmm. And I have one child in particular who just really did not enjoy writing. And I feel like I had to go through this explanation with this child of, if you're waiting for this magical moment where you feel inspired to write, and he knows I love to write. Occasionally that happens, but often it doesn't. And there needs to be a forcing of, I am here just to write. And my personal hack for me, when I really need to output a lot that I want to write, is I have to be away from the house. And I really like to be at a place that has free refills on drinks. So I remember this one. This was very bonding for him and I. We did this twice. I was like, okay, how about this? Let's block a Saturday afternoon. I have infinite amounts of work I need to do on my computer. Let's go to Panera, where you can get free refills, self-serve, free refills of the soda or whatever. You pick it, like your treat of a drink. And we're going to block this 3 or 4 hours. And we're going to sit there, and we are just there to do work, right? I mean, I'm willing to sit there for 7 hours. I can sit there until they kick me out. And sometimes he would actually try to gamify it, and he'd be like, okay, I've got to write this essay. Can we make it like a timed writing? They do timed writings all the time
in English class.
Would you just set your own alarm for 45 minutes so that it's as if you're forcing me that alarm is going to go off and I have to have something on paper by then? So we kind of had fun with that. I mean, just silly ideas to get through the ridiculousness of it.
So having gone through it a couple of times, my best piece of advice is that I tell my kids that you own your high school experience. Mm-hmm. You do what you want to do. I don't want you to join the NHS because you think that's going to get you into college. You join the NHS because if it's a service organization and you want to do service. If I've been grooming and telling my child to do all of these things in high school because it's going to get them into college, at the end of the day, if they're disappointed or they don't get the financial aid package that they need to attend, what was all that for? There tends to be, from a mental health perspective, this defeatist feeling of, why did I do all of that? They are figuring out who they are in high school as well. And in that process of figuring themselves out, they're making choices based on their desires, like what they want to do. And at the end of the day, after this whole college admission roller coaster is over, they own that. Their thoughts aren't, I tried all these things. I tried to do everything they told me to, and I'm still not going to my dream school. Instead, at the end of the day, it's like, I figured out who I am. I'm happy with what I did in high school, and it is what it is. I wasn't judged on something that wasn't me. I was actually judged on me, and I'm okay with who I am. Mm-hmm. So from a mental health perspective, it is one suggestion that I have, a possible piece of advice that listeners may latch on to kind of survive this process throughout high school with a, confident, adjusted teenager at the end, who knows who they are.
Yes, this goes so much back to this idea that we discussed in Inspiring Internal Drive of adjusting parental expectations specifically for your child, but also for this like era of life that they're living in, which is different than when we were teenagers, and for encouraging them to enjoy the process, to not be focused on the results.
If I were to summarize my thoughts on the college application process, it would be first to acknowledge that it can be an emotional time for both kids and parents, and that can feel like a lot of pressure. And let your child navigate high school with their own decision making so they can help during this crucial period, not just be ready to apply to college, but to have figured out who they are and what their self-identity is during this process. And if they own the process through high school, then they can, be more prepared for the results of that judgment of college admissions officers.
Yeah, so I think I'd like to conclude this just by saying to all of those parents out there who have kids awaiting results tomorrow for Ivy Day, best of luck. I have a child who's awaiting for one school, decided to apply to one Ivy based on her major, as she knows it's a reach. It's kind of the best position to be in because she and I both don't expect her to get in as great as she is. I mean, again, this is statistics, right? By statistics, she's not going to get in. And honestly, Sylvia, if she did get in, I just don't know that that's the best fit for her anyway, because we haven't said this yet in this episode, but I also have seen enough kids go through it that I don't necessarily believe the highest academic institution you get into correlates with where you may have the best overall experience as far as your happiness, your classes, whatever it is, right? There's so many other things to factor in, the feel of the campus, whatever it is. But what I will say about her application process is every time she gets an acceptance, it's accompanied with, and by the way, this year, the numbers of applicants exceeded every year prior, right? She just had one we had 100,000 applicants for our freshman class. Every single acceptance comes with, we have exceeded our numbers of applicants again. It's just getting worse because the colleges can't create more room, right?
Right.
They're trying to shoehorn people in, but they typically are staying steady in what their freshman class size is.
Yes. And whatever happens tomorrow, if your child is waiting for an Ivy, or if you feel, after this whole college application process, if you want to kind of think about your parenting and parenting strategy from a different light, I do recommend a previous episode that we have released, Teen Mental Health Facing Failure. I think it might be uplifting to parents to think about not just your child's success, but training them to overcome failures as a parent to make them more resilient for the future.
Absolutely. And, a number of the things we mentioned in this episode were this idea of, your child best, your child knows themselves best, and encourage them to look back on what they've done. I mean, clearly, with this case that we're talking about, if you have an application that is viable for an Ivy League, that's to be applauded.
Right. That is Everest Base Camp, right?
Absolutely. Or higher. Right. Maybe it's base camp 2 or 3, right? It's so good, right? So at any rate, yes, as we think about teen mental health, this is an exceptionally stressful roller coaster. And yes, we'll be back. We'll see you next time. Let's do something lighter like bedwetting. Isn't it so much easier when they're toddlers?
Yes.
This is too heavy.
All
right. Good luck, everyone. And we will see you again.
This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.